Hey everybody, we're back with the Awe and Wonder AAC podcast. Today's topic is bright beginnings. So we're really excited to have three people here talking to us about how they got started with how they get started with AAC for younger students. And so some really great perspectives. We're excited to pick their brains. We've got Kaylee and Katie from the Birth to Three area coming in, and then we've got Kaylee Hull, we're going to call her Miss Hull, from the school perspective. So we'll take a minute to have you guys introduce yourselves. Let us know what is your role, what's your population that you work with, and your service delivery model. So Miss Hull, Kaylee Hull, let's start with you.
Hi, so I am technically like a K6 or K7, so kindergarten through 6th or 7th grade life skills teacher. I work in a really small district. The student that we'll be talking about today that I have kind of worked with AAC on is young, kindergarten. And my students vary in skill level. So I teach life skills technically, but because I'm from such a small district, our life skills is a little bit different than what traditional life skills classrooms look like in other areas or in larger districts.
Okay, and so you've got quite a range in that one class.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mrs. Hall. Kaylee, how about you?
Hi, yes, I am a speech language pathologist. I work for the Arizona Early Intervention Program, serving birth to 3, primarily working in homes and doing some virtual sessions as well.
How long have you been doing it?
I've been doing this for about 7 years now.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And you partner with Katie Chung.
Hi, I'm a physical therapist. So yeah, I'm on the same team as Kaylee. We work for AZIP, the Early Intervention Program in Arizona. I'm mostly home-based, a little bit of virtual since COVID. Yeah.
And how long have you
Great.
been doing this?
About just over 3 years now.
Okay. How about you, Miss Hill? How long have you been a teacher?
About 5 years.
Okay.
All right. And so we've got a little Arizona, we've got a little Washington State, and different perspectives. This is going to be fun. We are really excited to talk to you guys today.
We wanted to start with kind of what got you into it, because we all know that none of us had enough training on AAC in grad school or enough exposure, honestly, to even be excited about it. So what turned the tide for you? Let's start with Katie and Kaylee from Arizona. Tell us a little bit about the first kid who just made you go, oh, wait, maybe they need more.
So I joined AZIP a little bit after, Kaylee's been on this team for a while, and she had some exposure to AAC, which is really nice. We have this kiddo on our team, or was on our team, and Kaylee can kind of talk about what she introduced first to her. But as soon as she kind of had the opportunity to communicate, she was like a toddler turning into a teenager, like telling us off and making it really well known that she has a lot to say. And it's cool because even as like a physical therapist, you think our focus is mobility and all of that, but to focus on the full child and give them a voice and give them a right is super important to me. And I think it makes more of a difference so I can establish that connection with them.
For sure.
Yeah. How old was that child?
She's like 2?
Yeah, she was 2 when we first introduced AAC to her. And she had come to me a little bit later. So typically we get them closer to birth, but she had a longer hospital stay. And so she was almost 2 when she came to me. And this was like my first experience with a child that was that medically involved, because we had just gotten our contract back with ASDB and FBC. So she had visual impairment. So prior to her, I was not working with children that had visual impairments. So kind of she was my first very complex where I just didn't really know where to start. But her mom.
What is her
told me-
diagnosis?
So she had CVI, and then she just had quadriplegic cerebral palsy.
She has also congenital heart conditions.
Yeah, congenital heart condition. So
Was she trach?
she also had a ventilator. So she had complications during her heart surgery that led to a hospitalization, that led to, unfortunately, a seizure and a brain injury. And so we got her after her brain injury, and so she was on a vent. She had CVI. She had the diagnosis of cerebral palsy. So this was my first experience with all of that. And her mom was amazing, and just she told me, I know she's hearing me. I know she understands everything I'm saying. And I think it was really her mom that like just constantly saying that to us, that we were like, okay, we gotta do something, we gotta figure it out. So I introduced, the first thing to her was just the jelly bean switch for her to activate a toy, and immediately, I mean,
Her smile.
it took everything in her to activate this switch. I mean, it really did, like motor planning, but she did it, and she did it repeatedly, and it was purposeful. And from there, we just took off. So it was a really amazing experience.
That is so exciting. What toy did you use? Because she does have CVI, which is cortical visual impairment. Did it play music, or was it vibrating or something? Vibrating. Okay.
I started with the vibrating toy, and then we also used a musical, like kind of light up toy that she had gotten from FBC, the Foundation, for Blind Children. So both of those, but the vibration was what she took to initially.
And so for people listening, they might be thinking, well, a switch that activates a toy isn't AAC, right? Because it's not communicating anything. And first of all, I would say, oh, it's communicating a lot, right? Right.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's not saying words. But it means that they're doing something with their bodies to make something happen in their environment. They're controlling their environment, which is what a lot of what communication is. And prior to speech, that's all children do, is do stuff. They smack, they push, they run, they do, right? And they're communicating what they like, what they don't like. So there's a lot of communication that happens through all that body movement that isn't that. And by the way, then her face lit up, I heard you say, right? And it's like, not only is that communicating that I like this toy because I'm going to hit this again and it's so hard to hit it. It's I like the control, and I'm going to show you that I like this because I want more of this, right? And then she would let you know when you took something away. You do that too, right? And again, those that haven't worked with kids with trach or vent, they're not putting out they're not putting out noise. She didn't have a valve, so you're looking at that face, right? And she's a sassy face on her, right? She's a lot of things.
Yes.
I think it really opened up like my mind to realize she is hearing me, she is understanding me, and as long as just a simple hit of a switch can indicate yes, no, again, more, all done. I mean, it was really amazing. From there, we just took off
because from there you went to single message buttons, right? Those talk buttons, and you record something on there, and then she would hit it for yes, or hit it for no, or hit it for more, like you said. So just hitting a switch to do a toy means she can hit a switch that has voice output as well. Yeah.
What was she using? What part of her body?
So we did use her hand and her head. So we actually would give her the choice. Her mom liked to give her the choice. Do you want to use your hand today or your head today? She would just place it either by her hand. If she didn't move her hand after a while, we would put it up by her head. And if she turned her head to hit the switch, then that was what she wanted to use that day. And then at one point, when we moved, past the point of even just recorded buttons, and she got her AAC device, she would scan with her head. So she would go through all her options with her head, and then either she would select with her hand, or I would or mom would select for her, just depending on kind of like the day, because it's fatiguing to do that for a long period of time.
And sometimes it was partner assisted scanning. So we would scan for her and all she had to do was hit when she heard the one she wants, depending on kind of her, what day she was having.
Yeah.
But
Either
yeah,
way.
she's not, her vision is poor. So her strength was hearing. So she's listening to choices. And I mean, she's doing the hardest way to communicate. And she's 2.
Yeah, she was a great listener. She would listen to each option and she could tell you a whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just by hitting a listening.
I still work with her.
You?
I do. And so sometimes when like I see her usually at the end of the day. So when the device is a lot, sometimes it's so easy to do like yes, no, which decision, these are your choices, and just doing a simple head movement or something too. So just it's been fun to utilize just a bunch of different ways to make communication easy for kids.
What I love about the story is that it's like, okay, if she can do it, right? Because I just looked at this really hard body that's on a trach and a vent and that, has a lot of things going that, such complex physical needs, right? If she can do it, what am I overlooking? Who else can do who else can do hard things, right?
Yes, definitely. That was the thinking.
I also love that, when you were talking about her, like you're giving her some control over her environment and she's probably like, yes, these people get it now, right? And then you're giving her choices and you said like for that day, what does she want to do? Or that hour, what does she want to do? I love that it's student child led and that's awesome.
So Miss Hall, what about you? I don't know this story but where was there a child in your background as they're talking? You're like, oh yeah, I know this. I know the really hard one for me that made me go, wait a minute, if you can do it, anyone can.
Yeah. So this was last year with this child, and I have had students in my classroom that utilize AAC before, right? I'm also a CBT. And so in homes, I've used AAC with children, but I've never been part of like the implementation process. I've never been, so I came from a BCBA or came from an outside SLP and they come to school with it already and they already know how to use it. I'm not doing any of that hard work right there, right? And so I am just encouraging them to use it at that point, right? Giving those opportunities. But last year I had a student come to school for the first time in kindergarten. They'd never been to school before, so they hadn't gone to preschool or anything like that. And they really struggled behaviorally. So we saw a lot of physical aggression. We saw a lot of running around the classroom. And we kind of described it as like a pinball, right? Like where were they going to bounce off of next? Because they were into everything and putting everything in their mouths. And but they seemed very smart. So they knew what they were doing. And they were very purposeful about their actions. So they would sometimes like watch and wait until we turn around and then would run to the cabinet. Like bolt there, and we have to like intervene before they climbed up onto it. And so as we all know, behavior is communication, right? Like that this child was communicating with us.
Mm-hmm.
He was communicating that he had wants and needs and he didn't like things and he did like things. We just weren't able to know what specific things that he wanted or needed. And so we were really concerned about those behaviors. And I said, we have to give him a better way to communicate. Like this isn't working. He can't, hit and kick and spit on us all day long. And not just because of us, like obviously we don't like that, but he does not look like he's having a good time either. And
Mm-hmm.
so we brought in an autism specialist, and the specialist recommended that we do PECs. And I'm not trained in PECs, and none of the team is trained in PECs. I work for I guess, like I said, a small school district, and resources are definitely limited in comparison to large school districts or private practices and stuff like that. Clinics and things like that are much more able to kind of bring in the experts or find the resources. And so we said, well, what if we try to learn PECs? And I just felt really skeptical about the PEC situation with this child because I know that PECs is often recommended to start with, right? And then once they show competency with PECs, then we evolve into AAC is what I kind of started going to research and stuff. And so that's what I was finding from people was that was the progression that you're supposed to use.
Definitely. I'm going to interrupt you there just because you used a couple acronyms. So PECS is the Picture Exchange Communication System. And we use it so frequently, some people don't even know what that stands for anymore. But if you're needing a visual, it's usually a picture. Sometimes the picture's laminated and even Velcroed. And sometimes there's pictures in a pocket chart. Sometimes there's pictures Velcroed to a wall in a classroom. Other times it can be put in a personalized book. There's a system behind the official PECS program, and then everyone's gone rogue and used PECS for visual schedules and for choice making. And a lot of times PECS or picture exchange is used at snack time so they can get another goldfish. So the old school way is like, well, first do all that. And then if they're really good at that, then maybe they get to be evaluated for high tech, which is like an iPad or a tablet or something like that. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I do want to be sure that in case somebody doesn't have a visual of what you're talking about, I want to give that to them because this story is so great. So, because what you're saying is true. You've been told by the autism specialist to try PECS or try low tech, meaning it doesn't have voice output. And you've been told to do that with a student who has a very low attention span. And those on the autism spectrum also have a lot of sensory needs. So they could either be sensory seeking on a picture that's Velcroed, or they could be sensory aversive, meaning they don't want to touch it or they don't like the sound of a Velcro being ripped off. There's a lot of reasons actually why PECS cannot be the go-to for people. And obviously in the student that they were just talking about, PECS is not an option. She doesn't have the dexterity to pull off a picture or point to a picture. So if we're waiting for them to master something they physically can't master, before we do high-tech AAC, we've lost before we started. But anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I do want to explain it. So, okay. So return to your story.
Yeah. So basically, I said, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I'm skeptical. Right. And this child, I kind of play with things a little bit. Right. And I would offer them pictures of things and ask them to pick one. And they would just kind of swipe them away or just kind of grab at them, but they weren't grabbing at the one they wanted. They would grab at one and like throw it away. This kid loves it. They love to throw away. So everything gets literally put in the garbage can. We have to sift through the garbage can every night because who knows what's in there. You turn it back for 2 seconds and the key to the iPad container is in the garbage. But so all these pictures would always end up in the garbage. And they did not have any interest in what it was. And they weren't even scanning the field. So they weren't.
Tell us how you really feel, right? He's actually literally thrown them in the garbage.
Yes. And so I like, these are trash. No, thank you. And so I said, something else has got to give here. Right. And I noticed that anytime we had another student who uses an iPad as a reinforcer. So they get the iPad when they do a certain amount of work and all of that. But when that child would use their iPad, the student I'm talking about was not interested in the visual on the iPad, but they were interested in the like the auditory output. So they would walk over to it and put their ear down, and the kid would be like, out of my space kind of a thing. But I was like, okay, so they're looking for that auditory output. Like, how do we do something else? So of course, our district did not have the ability to produce a AAC device immediately at that time, right? I had to kind of prove that it was going to work. And so I kind of played with like those buttons that you push that make sounds. You can like record things on. I think I see people use them for dogs to outside, the dog says. And so I got a couple of those and I kind of played around with those a little bit to see if they would be interested in them. And the student immediately took to them and was pushing the buttons. And at first just would push them just to hear them. And then once that novelty of that kind of wore off a little bit, we started working with making it purposeful, right? So I had 2 different colored buttons and I would hold something out. And if you want the Skittle, you have to push the red button, and I'd point to the red button and they would push it. And I was like, okay, they can do this. Like, we can do this. So that's when we consulted actually with SETC, you guys, and said, how do we make this happen? Like, I've never done this before. I don't want to just start kind of going rogue here and assuming that I can do all of the things, right? I want to make sure that I'm going to set this child up for the best opportunity. I don't want to break it before I even start it. And so we decided not to go with PECS and to just trust that I was right because there was that fear for me that like, what if I'm wrong? What if this isn't going to work? Because we don't have unlimited resources and we don't have the ability to regain trust essentially with families. if you set this up and you say like, hey, we're going to try this, and then it doesn't work.
Right.
I was really nervous about that, but so we implemented it. And at first it was just one button. So we used the program Go Talk, which is recommended by you guys. And it was on an iPad, and all it had on there was one big button, and it said candy. And that was, this child is highly food motivated, will do anything for candy. And so all there was on there was candy, and he pushed it, and it said candy. And so he just kept pushing it, listening to it over and over again. And, but was kind of carrying it around, pushing it. And so I brought him back to me, and I pushed the button, and I said candy, and handed it to him. And it was like instantaneous. He was like, that's what this does? Okay, candy. And then would hold his hand out to me. Candy, candy, candy. And this kid ate 4,000 mini M&Ms one day because every time he pushed it, I was giving him the M&M. And I was really nervous that we wouldn't be able to go that next step. What happens when you put two buttons on there? Is he going to be able to differentiate that they do different things, they have a different purpose? So we're kind of like using man training with it, just manding or requesting essentially highly preferred things. So we didn't want to put on there things that didn't mean anything to him. We want to show him like, this is purposeful, and you need this, and you want this. Yeah. And he quickly was like, yes, I do. I do want this. So we put out I think the second one was like a Cheeto. And so we changed it to candy or Cheeto. And at first just candy, 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 candy. And I had 2 bowls. And when the candy ran out, I remember sitting like kind of on the edge of my seat thinking, please choose the next button. And when candy was empty, he said candy. And I was like, toward the bowl, I was like, the bowl's empty. No more candy. It's gone. You can have Cheetos though. And he like looked around and looked at the Cheetos and went, Cheetos. And I was like, oh, it worked. It was that moment like, yeah, we did it. And I think because none of us really knew what we were doing, it was extra exciting that it took.
Yeah. And what I love about it, Kaylee, is that it wasn't like you waited like 3 weeks and we're like, you're going to have to work on that one button. And, it was like, this is immediate, right? You emailed us after the consultation, I think within like 3 days or something, saying, oh my gosh, he wants to go outside. Now I know all this stuff about him because we've given him more vocabulary and more options.
And he was bolting from the classroom. That was a huge problem for us, was that he was eloping from the classroom, just running off, kind of at a moment's notice. So he'd be standing there and then all of a sudden take off on us. And he would elope the classroom. I would estimate close to 30 times a day. And it was so quick. And we, so as soon as he showed me that he was ready for more buttons, we added more buttons. And once we kind of mastered what we had, we were like, let's give him more, let's give him more, let's give him more. And so I think the 3rd or 4th button we put on there was outside. And hoping that would, even though it wasn't so highly preferred, like the Cheetos or the M&Ms, but it was something that I was like, I wonder if he's telling us he just wants to get out of here. Like if he's not eloping for like the purpose of attention or just to avoid tasks or whatever, I wonder if he's doing it just because he wants to go outside. And so we put outside on there, and he instantly started using it. And we've seen, he has not eloped from the classroom one time since. And every time he'll say outside. And at first we let him go outside every time he said it. And so my parents were like, we've been outside 1,000 times today. I was like, I know, I'm so sorry. We just have to keep going outside. and now we tell him, no, like it's not time to go outside anymore. But he's okay with that. But at first we went outside and we had a lot of M&Ms, and and the parent was really excited to see that too, because we kind of brought them in and said like, look at this. But it was awesome.
I bet. That's so exciting.
Yeah. I was thinking too that about readiness, and a lot of times we hear, oh, they're not ready for that yet. And often it's because of the behavior you just saw, Miss Hull, like, oh, they're bouncing off the walls. They won't attend. They throw pictures away. And sometimes they might say, oh, they're not ready yet because in birth to 3, they're 1 year old. Just age alone is a disqualifier, right? Right. Even though actually I remember I was in grad school when I learned that kids understand symbolic language at 8 or 9 years old. And it just not years old, months old. And just so happened that my daughter was that age. So I literally just made like a picture board with board maker pictures, and it had like Cheerios, and it had it had a bubbles board maker thing, and it had something else on it. And she crawled, pulled it off, crawled over to me and handed it to me. And I hadn't even modeled it to her. And I realized that, typical development means that there's a need to communicate, and they're demonstrating that at 8 to 9 months. So when we say the kids aren't ready yet, and what stood out to me on your story is maybe maybe they haven't displayed skills yet because they haven't been exposed to anything to do that. But maybe the practitioners or the teachers or the parents or the people that don't want to fail aren't ready to take the risk. Because what you're saying is, what if I screw this up? I have this kid from K to 6. I'm in a small district. Like, I'm going to be out of luck if I threw out a pipe dream in kindergarten and then they didn't succeed. And then obviously the alternative is, and what if you don't try it? And guess what? No one learns AAC without practice. So waiting to expose is not building anyone's skills. Mm-hmm. So what do you guys think? I know you guys, let's start with Birth to 3 team on this, but then I'm going to come back to you on this with this whole is what are you telling parents about alternative communication? And at Birth to 3, it's a little scary because parents aren't ready to say, well, wait, they're going to talk in a minute. Like, they're going to talk tomorrow. Like the example you guys gave with the Trakin event, that's not as hard of a sell, right? Because you're like, well, just mechanically, she's not going to make a noise right now. So we're going to give her another way. But those other kids where you're pretty sure that even when they are verbal, they're going to be low intelligibility because the tone in their body is low due to their cerebral palsy or their complex needs. You don't have that crystal ball that they're not going to be a verbal communicator, but you're looking at the person in front of you knowing they have more to say and they can't tell us. And that does look like behavior. And that does look like hitting and biting and self-interest behaviors if you're physically capable of doing that. If you aren't physically capable of doing that, it looks like they sleep all the time. It looks like they aren't paying attention. It looks like they don't care about anything. So what about that they're not ready yet? And how much of that comes from practitioners, from other people in your field and parents? And where are you finding the verbiage? What's the verbiage, I guess, is when you're finding the most success with either the one person on your team who still doesn't get it, or the families that are hesitant to go, well, if we use that, they'll never talk.
I think that Katie and I are, like on the same page with every kid that we see. So there's no convincing each other. It's just like, hey, we got to get started. What do we need? Yeah. And then with talking to parents, we always word it, or at least I word it as, while we are working towards verbal communication, I want to give your child a way to communicate with us. I don't want to limit them and say they're only allowed to communicate verbally. If they can communicate in another way, let's access that. And honestly, I don't think that I can think of gotten pushback from any parent yet. Sometimes it might take a little bit for them to really use it themselves and to really buy into it. But as soon as they see that their child is able to communicate and has a lot to say, using pictures, and I think they're all very well, but we do say that this is what we're working on while we're moving towards verbal communication, and this is just another form of communication, total communication. So
yeah, I think most of my teen lead kids that I care for are more medically complex, so I've kind of been in the home and working with them quite frequently. And same as like a physical aspect, I never say your child's never going to walk, because they hear it enough from a lot of other providers. So I say we're going to always work towards that, but there's other steps and other things we can do in the meantime to get them to that goal. And it's the same with communication. What I've also found, what I think helps with that buy-in and just understanding, is I've really had to point out to parents what I'm noticing and reinforcing, like, hey, that look that they just did, that's them making a choice. That look that they just gave us, that's telling them, I understand, hey, I made a choice, now give it to me. So picking up on those really slight cues, or that little like half smile, or that like movement with their hand or a little twitch that they think is incidental but really well timed, all of it's super purposeful. And so I think we're trained to like look at that, pay attention to all those little things, give them that wait time to be able to motor plan and make that decision. The more I've talked to parents about what I'm noticing and like this is communication, then they're like, oh, I get it now. Like that's communication too. So I think that's helped us with the buy-in. And so, yeah, it's been great having Kaylee on our team. We don't have to convince each other. We're just ready to go.
That is so great. But you know what? I love the comparison to physical, because it's like, we wouldn't say that you were not putting a baby in a stroller because we don't want them because they might not walk. We're using a stroller because they're not walking right now. And it's easier for everybody if we can get there in one piece, right?
Yeah.
We're going to put them in a high chair. It's a special chair because they can't sit well yet. And it doesn't mean that we're enabling that they will never sit correctly. It means that now we can sit in a way that allows them to be part of the family and allows them to self-feed or do all the other pieces of that independently. So I kind of love that comparison to some of we don't seem to have. There are hangups about getting wheelchairs. I've seen those, but we don't have a lot of resistance towards other physical aids. And so it's like, I like that, drawing those parallels.
Mm-hmm. Kaylee and Katie, I'm wondering, you two, you're on board, you're in sync, and your parents are on board too, it sounds like. Do you ever have someone else that, like the doctor or are you doing some kind of outreach or education in another way?
We spend lots of time doing education and outreach. I frequently get phone calls, unfortunately, from doctors' offices asking me what the heck is AAC and why am I writing a script for this?
Really?
Yeah.
And what do you say?
I give them a full explanation, and by the end of the phone call, they're like, oh, thank you. And yeah, we get a lot of pushback from, I think, a lot of providers. And we also get kids sent to us from, unfortunately, from other areas in the state that are much older and they've never been exposed to anything. So it's definitely, it's a work in a progress with a lot of providers out there still.
Yeah. Do you have any, we know what you say as an SLP. We're like, yeah, I think I know what I would say. But for those of us who aren't, or who are, people listening who are going to be working with older students who are trying to get that device, we see that a lot too. Is there anything that seems to kind of click when you're explaining it for people? Like, why would they need this or what it means?
I think like Katie did a really good job explaining, like with like even the comparison to walking. I always just say, why would we limit them to verbal communication if they're capable of pointing, or if they're able to shake their head, or if, they're able to even just smile. We can give them
their eyes too.
Use their eyes. Yeah. Anything. Why would we limit that? And usually no one has an answer, I would say, for that. And so it's pretty easy from that point.
And my job is to promote independence and promote as much ability to do things on their own, even if that looks adapted. And I think when I remind people that's my role, what are they going to say?
Right.
Yeah. Miss Hull, what about you? What kind of language are you using to open the doors with family or maybe other people on your school team about why AAC or why high-tech AAC?
Yeah, so I think that like when you're in a school setting, it's a little bit unique because you're limited to how much you can expect from or suggest, I guess, even to other people, right? So like we're really careful not to suggest certain things to families or to the parent, I guess, because then the school district could be liable to have to pay for it. Or there's kind of like that, oh, you're suggesting, you're kind of out of your lane, right? Like, here's your lane and you're not in it anymore. And so sometimes you're really cautious about saying things that you know will help children, because you don't want to leave your lane. I think that when you're in like clinical settings or you're in like private settings, those settings allow you to offer things, because those people came to you to find service, right? So they came to you knowing there was an issue with speech. They came to you knowing that they needed your help with physical therapy or motor planning or whatever it might be. But when they come to us, they just send their kid to school. And so sometimes it can be difficult for parents to hear things from us that they either know and don't want to accept, or we're sometimes the first people to tell them something, right? So they have not thought of that before. And you know that their homes, they're doing the best they can. That these families are, we try so hard not to judge them. I try so hard to make sure that I am never that person who makes them feel like they aren't doing enough. Sure. And so when I'm offering or recommending things like AAC, I tread very lightly. And I try to word it in like a really positive, what if we, or could we, will you trust me kind of a way. And I think that luckily I have a really good relationship with majority of the families of my students, because I'm really open and honest. And so if I don't think something's going to work, I'm going to say that. I'm never going to kind of lead a family to believe that there's more hope for something than there truly would be. Not that I'm going to say, no, we can't do that, but I'm a little bit realistic sometimes. And I think that they appreciate that. So they often, when I bring things up like AAC or other things that are kind of could be a challenge, I have that trust already built with them. And so they just kind of go along with me because like, hey, I'm going to trust you with this, right? Like, hey, I'm going to believe you. And we're a team. And so when it comes to like staff though, it can be a little bit more challenging. Luckily, I have a phenomenal SLP at my school. Her name's Kay Jellison, and she is absolutely incredible. And I said, what about AAC? And she was like, let's do it. And so she's the one who reached out to you guys for me and said, let me find some resources. Let me see where we can go with this. And my administrator, Chris Hansen, she's my principal, and she's phenomenal as well. And so she's very trusting, and says, like, if you think this is what we should do, let's do it. And I think that adds a little bit of, makes me a little bit more nervous, because all these people are like, yeah, we trust you. I'm like, but what if I'm wrong? What if this isn't going to work? And my fear is always like, what if I break that trust? Right. And then if the child isn't ready for AAC, but if I was wrong, and then when I think that now they're ready, I've kind of broken that trust this time. Right. Luckily it was not the case. It worked. And so we didn't have to do that, but I try really hard to offer some empathy and offer some, like, I hear this is really challenging, and there's a chance this might not work, right? And if it doesn't, we'll find a new game plan. But we have to give something a try. And I think that with this child in particular, I was showing the parent, like, he is communicating. He's communicating all day long, just not in a really productive way, right? And so when he hits me, he wants something. He's not hitting me for fun. And I'm using that kind of behavior at home. And the parent was like, yeah, that's how they act at home too. And I said that ultimately, like, what I see most often is that when we see behaviors that are really challenging like that, or that are aggressive or unsafe, oftentimes there's a really frustrating feeling behind that. And they can't express that, whether the child's verbal or not. There's some kind of a frustration that they can't verbalize, they can't get across. And with this child, because they can't aren't able to provide me the reason or the need that isn't being met, that's what they're doing. And we have to take that and say, like, that's communication. They're already doing it. They want to communicate. They want to show you what they want. When they lead you to the kitchen, they're showing you, I'm hungry. What if instead of trying to yank your arm off to get you to the kitchen, they could just tell you, I'm hungry, or select an item that they were wanting. So a lot of it's like that. The verbiage is like that. Trust, we have to trust each other and hope that it works and that they're already communicating. Let's expand that to something that's a little more safe.
first of all, I like two things about what you said. One, as I think that you have to have an already established trust. And I think that all three of you do that well. And it is trust without judgment. And I think that's critical. We, over the years, we've talked a lot with parents about just like kind of where they're at in dealing with the stages of grief around the child that they have versus maybe the child that they thought they were going to have. Right. And in birth to three, we see that a lot because, we see accidents at birth. We see lots of very medically fragile children. If you qualify for therapy under 3, then your body is complex already. Right. And then, parents say that first day of kindergarten, when they go into a life skills class instead of a regular kindergarten class, there's so much grief around just like, oh, this is not how I thought first day of school would go. And he's screaming and biting the teacher. And I don't even know what to say about that. So I feel like you guys, you build trust and you are pushing to say, but this is what they can do. And this is so when I do, when I am doing the interview before, I will ask things like, do they take your hand and grab you to the kitchen? Like you just said, and they say, oh yeah. And I'll be like, okay, so they have a communicative intent. They're intending to communicate with you already. Right. And then do they follow a direction within their mode of control, which means, do they hit the switch when you tell them to hit the switch? If they want bubbles, then they're following directions. It means their receptive language skills is already higher than their expressive language skills if they have no words, but they just follow that whole direction. Right. So I'm pointing out in the interview, sometimes it's all in the paperwork and I don't need to ask those questions, but I'm asking all those questions because I need them to say, oh yeah, they do this. Oh yeah, they do that. Oh yeah, they do this. Oh yeah, they do that. And I'm establishing that you already know they're in there. You already know they have something to say. You already know that they are understanding your language. And sometimes parents will say, oh no, I don't even know if they can do this. My therapist just said, maybe I should try it, but I don't even know if she understands anything. And I'll say, what happens when you tell her no? Well, she freezes and then cries. I'm like, okay, so she understands no. And then they realize, oh, right. So it's like some of that is just explaining like, this is what we're observing. Like all of you had said today, we observe this and we attribute meaning to that. It's because the parents may be in a stage where they're still feeling out what they should be doing, right? They know twin brother or twin sisters doing all the things, or even the one younger than them can already do this or that. And they have a lot more going on in the family dynamics, but we're saying, yeah, but she gave you a snarky look because she knows exactly what you just said, that you said bedtime and she had that. Did you see that face? Right. So I think it's a lot of this is just pointing out your own observations, which is another thing I do in the evaluation too. It's like, I saw her look at all the choices. She almost picked the other one. Right. And you're just kind of saying out loud, this is what I'm observing. Your kid has a lot of thought into this choice right here. And then they do it. Right. And I'm not faking every time. It's amazing when you're like, and then I was so excited when he picked Cheetos. I feel it, girl. I'm excited months later hearing that he picked Cheetos because I know what that means. And I know what that potential means. But the other thing I do when I talk to parents is I say, this takes 6 months to 2 years to get good at this, as all new languages do. Right? You just kind of pause for a minute. Like, you're going to pick up French. 6 months to 2 years, as all new languages do. And it just kind of like, so when you feel like we tried it and it didn't work, did you try it for 6 months or 2 years? Or did you try it for that one day or that one short period of time? Right. So it's like, we're going to alter what we're trying if we're not being successful, but we're never not trying to communicate with your child. It's too important. Right.
Mm-hmm. So in this podcast series, we're calling it Another Perspective, this first series, because we want to hear from you all. So we always ask at the end, what what do you want people to know about you or your perspective? And so when we're looking at Bright Beginnings and working with these young children, I want to ask you, and Katie, I'll start with you. What do you want people to know about your role in helping young children communicate?
I guess when you say young children, I also want people to know, like, we start with some of our kids, we start introducing, if we're lucky to have them this young, at like 6, 7, 8, 9 months. We're like, here's a picture and a song, and you're going to sing it to them if they look or reach for it.
Yeah, wow.
And I think people are so, like, to me, that's the norm now. I'm like, oh, how many months? Oh, 6 months? We got to get going on this. And so I think that's why we've been able to refer so young. And so when me and Kaylee say, like, we got a kid so late, they're much older. Like when we get them at 2, it's like, oh, we have to play catch up. And we're like scrambling to get them like an adaptive seat, a whatever, a gait trainer, and a communication device. So to us, old is like 2 years old. So we like to start early. And I think that's so important for us. And I guess from a PT perspective, because I don't think most people think, why is PT so invested or knows anything about AAC and communication? I think especially why I love the early intervention birth to 3 program so much is that I get to be in homes, I get to work directly with families, and I get to help them learn how to feel empowered for their child and advocate for their child and know what they're capable of, and to make sure that they share that with everybody else. And that includes communication, that includes independence, that includes mobility. So that's why I love early intervention, and that's why I value communication so much. And if I can communicate with the child, that builds my relationship with them. And that makes tummy time a lot easier and whatever else that I'm trying to get my kid to do.
Right.
But, you know, we have, like we would give adults, like everybody should have a choice. So I always give choices. And so the quicker I can communicate with this child and they can communicate with me, then everything just goes smoother. And when everybody's on board, me and Kaylee have just seen like our kids surprise us in so many ways every day, how much they understand and how witty they are and how much they can like get away by like choosing alternative ways to say they want to sleep by like saying, I need a break or stop.
Right.
So it's been really fun for me. And that's why I love my position.
Well, we can tell you love it. I appreciate you sharing that though about, you know, these are babies at 6 months old that you're working with. And I think that's really good for people to hear, that's what we're talking about, these young kids.
Yeah.
Keely, how about you? What do you want people to know about your role in helping young kids communicate?
So, you know, Katie pointing out that we're starting at 6 months old, you know, that's so important, because when I first started in this role, and even now, I'm often told or asked, are they ready for speech? Are they ready for speech? That's my Katie will tell you, that's my biggest pet peeve. If someone asks, are they ready for speech? You know, I have to keep my cool. And so I want everyone to know that a child is ready for speech the moment that they're born. There's research that shows that a child can distinguish at like the time of birth between their native language that their mother has been speaking to them in the womb and a new foreign language that they've never heard. And knowing that, I think it's important for people to really to just start young. And so just giving everyone a voice, giving them, you know, even if that's not verbal, then, you know, that's what we need to be looking towards. So, and Katie and I, we don't have a lot of resources. Early intervention is a very hard and limited, you know,
Underfunded.
It's underfunded. And
so
yes, the area that we work needs it the most. We have a laminator that is 7 years old and
they don't work very well.
It doesn't work very well.
We've crumpled paper sometimes.
We have a printer, a laminator, and laminator sheets, and we do our best with that. And I mean, we get these kids by 12 months making choices. I mean, It's really great. So you don't need a lot to get started. I want people to know that you don't need a lot. I mean, and working, I think like with the families explaining, you'll find that the buy-in it's pretty easy. And these families just want to understand their kids. They want to understand their wants, their needs. And once they see that that's possible, so I think taking that risk, introducing things early on it's vital for their development. And I mean, if Katie and I honestly didn't believe in these kids, there's not a whole lot of people out there in the community that are part of their team that will. So
Agreed.
Thanks,
And
Kaylee.
I'm a big fan. And you guys, I do the evaluations and I get their referrals. And sometimes they don't have much of a diagnosis, or they don't have a whole lot going on. And I just trust. We have a trust. If they have referred, then this is then they get a chance, And so that's how I get to come on the SETSI classes and be like, oh yeah, I just did an eval for a 13-month-old and she totally qualified for eye gaze. And you know what I mean? It's because I get to reap the fruits of their labor, and sometimes their labor is convincing a doctor to write the script to even get me there. So I love the partnership we have.
Us too. Thanks.
great.
How about you? What do you want people to know about your role?
Yeah, so my role as a teacher is very different. Like I said, because I have to tread lightly sometimes. I really want people to know, like, there's no judgment. Like, I think that sometimes parents will be nervous because they didn't think of this, or they're not doing all the things, right? Like there's 4,000 things that their child needs, and they forgot this one, or they overlooked this, or they thought about it and didn't know how to find help. And so that it's really big for me that there's no judgment. I have seen it all. And all I care about is like their child being able to communicate, or their child's needs being met, whether it's communication or other things, right? Like I'm not here to judge parents or to be that person who says, well, you should have. Like, it doesn't, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Right.
What can we do now? Right? Like, how do we move forward now? And so like, I think that along with that, on the same like kind of wavelength, is that there's resources out there. And I don't even know all of them. Hence, Kay, our SLP, reached out to you guys. She's like, oh, I know that's what SETC can, da-da-da. And so, I don't even know all the resources, but I think that it'd be so great for families to know that there are more options. And I think when you come from or areas like mine, that's kind of more rural and underfunded. I know that everyone's kind of, one of those things where like, everyone's underfunded right now. Everyone is struggling. So I feel it, but I think that it impacts families in a way where they don't know where to turn, right? There's not a big billboard saying like, hey, if your kid can't talk, come Google this or whatever, right? There's not like someone going door to door telling you what to do. So I think that, and when children are otherwise healthy, like this child is in my classroom, they don't see the doctor frequently who's going to give them recommendations and things like that. They're a little more limited in that way. So there's always resources. There's always somebody who knows somebody who can, figure something out and make the call or find somebody who does know. But I think that when I tell people like about what's happening with the student, or if when the people at school see them going around with their device and pushing all the buttons and saying all the things, I often hear something like to the effect of like, oh, Kaylee worked so hard to do this, or, Kaylee, look what she did. And for me, it's like, no, look what he did. Like, yes, I gave him the resources, I gave him the tools, I gave him the device, I showed him how to use it. But after that, like, he had to work hard for this. This was not something where overnight he was like, I can say all the things now. He really had to put everything he had into this. He had to want it. He had to be willing to work hard to show us that he can do it. And even though now, like, he hasn't mastered it, right? Like there's still a lot to learn. As you know, we all met like a few weeks ago about this, looking for next steps, the bigger and the better. His device has, I mean, gosh, close to 50 buttons on it now. Today he was telling me, I was holding up M&Ms, and what color is this? Green. And I'd hand him an M&M, and the green one. And he was on a roll. I mean, it was like red, purple, green. He was going for it because he knew that got him what he wanted. And it's a long road for him, and he has to work really hard to do it. But I think that sometimes like the kudos goes a little bit too much to me, for teaching it. And, yeah, it was hard, and we had to find some resources, and we had to, get help and stuff. But ultimately, like, all of that really hard perseverance, and what I hear, other Kaylee and Katie talking about as well, about like how hard their child worked to do this. I think that sometimes we forget how challenging it can be for the child, and how bad they had to want this, how important it had to be to them to be able to put this amount of work in. Because if this kid wanted, he could have just kept hitting and kicking, because it also was meeting his needs, right? Like, it was working basically, but this worked a little bit better, and it was harder. We like it much more. I think hopefully he likes it much more, but that kudos really goes to him. Like, he put his blood, sweat, and tears into this, and he earned it.
I love that.
Love it. And you just keep trying, you keep at it. And that's what I think we admire about you, Kaylee, from our interactions. It was like day one, we knew you were going to keep trying and keep at it. And
I think that's huge too. I think that's huge too, is that like, I was so scared to fail and I was so scared that like, this wasn't going to work, because then what? Right. I try to think about like, what is the biggest barrier to my students' life? And that's what we're working on. Right. Because ABCs are great. Math is great. But if they can't communicate, if they can't transition, if they can't do all those like those true life skills, how do you navigate? Do you know who you are? Do you know how to get help if you need help? Those things kind of take priority in a classroom like mine. And this child could not do that, any of those things, right? Because they couldn't communicate with anybody. And so really having to be ready to, if this doesn't work, then what? Because it doesn't mean it's over. If I had handed this child this iPad with the button candy on it and tried to show it to him, and he did not, I mean, I got so lucky immediately. It was like, boom, he wants that. He wants to work for this. He's willing to put the work in. If he hadn't understood, or if he wasn't willing to, it wouldn't have been the end. We would have had to find it would have been more difficult. We would have had to find additional resources, or additional kind of re-navigate how we were going to present this, or how we were going to be successful in this. But that success would have came eventually, and I know it would have. So I don't want anyone to like be discouraged when, their kid pushes candy or doesn't push candy the first time. I got really, really lucky that this child is so food motivated that candy was worth it. But I think that there's going to be the next child for me that doesn't. And at that point, we're going to have to keep trying, and we're going to have to persevere through that. And we're determined to make it work. There's always another route, another path we could follow. It doesn't have to necessarily work the first time.
Yeah. So we did this because we wanted people to recognize how young, is too young. And that's kind of not a thing. Right. And we've worked really hard on that here in Arizona on debunking that myth. And, having said that, and by the way, Ms. Hull, like if your student had birth to 3 services, right, and showed up with the iPad, right, you know what to do with that kid, and get, also that kid might be in general education and have more inclusion opportunities because they have already proven what they know, right? So there's so many good things about early intervention, and that's definitely something that the drum I'm always beating. Having said that, I always tell to families when I go, when should I have done this? And I say, the day I'm here is the best day, because that is the day that you decided to make the call, that you got the script, that your therapist made the recommendation. Today's the day. Today's the day, because today's the day the kid is doing it, right? And if woulda, coulda, shoulda doesn't get you anywhere, right? As therapists, we can begin as early as we think is correct. But but whenever the parents are ready is the best day, because that is when implementation will actually happen, right? And whenever the team is finally on board, that's the day. It doesn't matter if they're 4 or if they're 14. It doesn't matter if they're 13 months or 13 years, right? So that's the day. But if we can do it earlier, they do have a different trajectory in school, and we want to do that. But if you're listening and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my kid's 8 and I probably need one of these and I'm already too late, you're not too late. There's not too late on this. But if you're thinking, oh my gosh, my kid's 2, maybe they're not too young. The answer is you're right. They're not too young, right? So it's like, it's never too late. And frankly, it's never too early. So if you're a parent listening and you're wondering about this, now is the time.
Thanks. So thank you to Kaylee Koburi, Katie Chung, Kaylee Hall. We really appreciate having you guys on, and we'll see you all next week for another episode of our podcast.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.